Well, it didn't occur to me till just now that you're just going to hear a lot from me first thing in the day. That's a bit much, I know. I'm going to talk to you about, introduce this panel on artists. Something I'll say to you right off the bat is there's many ways you could think about NFTs. And I don't go too far into it. We're going to talk about digital art, but I want to say something. To me, the most important part of what's happened is not, in fact, the growth of digital art, but this simple transformation, which I went and talked to earlier, which is the role of a distributed trustless ledger. Here is a Babylonian food disbursement ledger of 1800 BC. Wow. That looks like a lot of work to figure out where the food's going. But the idea that with these blockchains, you can figure out who's bought what, and it is available for everyone to see. That transparency. Just to give you an analog corollary, someone buys an artwork in a gallery, you write it down, the gallerist writes it down, it goes out, it sells, they write it down, the next gallery writes it down, the artist says, how much they buy it for? The guy says, I don't know, plenty. All right. Artist says, I don't know, And there's a ledger. We keep track of things. Everyone writes it down. But it's all distributed behind doors in every different place. You got the idea, right? What this allows is that the sale happens online. Everybody sees it. The money spits out. Why is that important? That is a fundamental economic transformation. That's what's actually completely radical, what's happening in this space. I only say that because I talked about earlier about the artist's rights, but a lot of the conversation on NFTs is about aesthetics, about digital art, but the profound shift is actually in this. And the other part of this is what NFTs, the non-fungible nature of this. There's an essay by Walter Benjamin, famously called Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, where he talks about what will happen to art when you can actually mass produce it, thus, foregrounding the work that would come up with Warhol, where he'd make prints. And you thought, oh my gosh, if you can make, back in the day, they'd say, if you can make a photograph, photographs can't be art because you can make so many of them. All the conversations about NFT are the same as photography early on. It wasn't until recently MoMA had a photography department, just to kind of get your head around that. Because everyone said, if you can copy it many times, how do you build scarcity? And then they were like, well, you'll come up with this thing called editions. So there'll be signed 10 of them, right? Well, what the non-fungible token offers is the ability to produce one-of-a-kinds in the internet. I swear to God, when I heard one-of-a-kind images, I go, that's the art world. You ever noticed what's worth a lot of money in the art world? Does anybody know what's worth the most money? What medium? What is it? Painting. Why is painting so important to the art world? One of a kind. Hangs on the wall. I'm just saying that. It took me a long time. I'm very dumb. I was like, why is this painting thing so important to people? Why is it worth so much more money than my friend's performance art piece? My friend that was a performance, they didn't tell me that in grad school when you got into performance. They're like, that's awesome. You'll never make any money. And the performance art's like, painters, that's dead. And the painter's like, is it? I'll just keep painting. And then there's something like, my paintings sell a lot more than your performance art piece. That's because it's an economy. And the economy is real. And the non-fungible token thing, part of this is absolutely profound. Of course, there's a vast history of digital art, so much that's ridiculous for me to even talk about. I mean, here we are, Experiments in Art and Technology, 1967. This is a group produced between engineers, Rauschenberg and Robert Wilson. Did person-to-person contracts between artists and engineers, making a formal process of collaboration. Here's what's considered the first digital artwork. I mean, I think it's crazy. It was a nude. Fucking A, man. Patriarchy never goes away. Computer nude, Studies in Perception 1, Studies in Perception 4 million. The most widely circulated early artwork made using a computer. Look at that thing. That's back when you had to spend 4 days for something to print out and you're like, oh my God, I finally got some porn. This is Quantum, Kevin McCoy. This is what's considered the first NFT. There it is, 2014 idea to use blockchain technology to create an indelible provenance and ownership of digital images of this kind. Quantum's the first to ever be recorded in this way. Great artist. In 2017, CryptoPunks came out. CryptoPunks launched a fixed set of 10,000 items in mid-2017. So funny. In Cryptoland, 2017's like, total OG. You were there, and became one of the first inspirations for the ERC 721 standard. The ERC 721 standard, that is a protocol, smart contract protocol. Remember they were talking about the contract, the token? So this is a contract. And what's important to me about this, because for those late to the game, you have to bear in mind this. Imagine you're on the ground floor of NFTs, and someone puts these out there, these guys, and there's 10,000 of them fixed. And they start selling them. These are profile pictures. Like, you buy one, and that becomes your profile picture. You got it? It's simple. Seems silly enough. Sweet. What has become known is these things are worth gobs of cash at this point, millions of dollars, each one of them. But you didn't know that at the time. It's not like this started that way. The CryptoPunks thing all of a sudden demonstrated to people there is a vast interest on the internet of people having images that represent them. And because they're one of a kind, their value grows up a lot. Scarcity. It's almost like digital arts in finding scarcity and the basic economic principles. So profile pictures NFTs. The abbreviation refers to popular use of these NFTs as little profile pictures of social media sites. Oh, this is Moonbirds. I don't know if you've seen that new PFP project. So here's CryptoKitties by a group, and you'll start seeing it. We're now in the world where video games and art are very much related. You know, video games surpassed film and television and music as the #1 cultural influence in the world. So, you know, oh my God, I'm going too long. I just was thinking, you know, when the pandemic came, my friend Zane said to me, he goes, think of the pandemic as a global boot camp for the internet. Like, everyone's going to get online, and everyone's going to be familiar with it. And it's almost like all of this stuff was going to come, but it just sped up, right? And who was in the driver's seat? The video game generation. They've all been online. They all understand scarcity. They all understand avatars. The whole design thing. All got it. CryptoKitties was the first game to build on the Ethereum network. I mentioned that. Players buy, trade, and breed cats. But due to the game's popularity, it highlights several issues with how Ethereum works, especially when it comes to scaling. That said, these basic tricks that we're learning, they're the fundamental building blocks of what becomes NFTs. And they seem silly, but they're basic experiments that take off. And I think it's important to appreciate what they do. And their silly looks, I think, is actually even more cool because they look so dumb and the importance of them so radically important. POC. So this is that project I mentioned. This happened not so long ago. The money, $98.1 million, but this is the way it worked. It was sold as an open edition. Buyers could purchase any number of tokens starting with a unit price of $575, which increased by $25 every 6 hours. By the end, the tokens sold for a total of $91.8 million. And I forget the number, but yeah, there it was. 28,983 people bought that project. Just, can you imagine going to a physical gallery and having that project? Hold on, we got 28,000 people coming by today. Buyers. Is there a gallerist that has 28,000 buyers? Does that even exist? Do we understand what it means to have 28,000 people buy a singular artwork? This is IX Shells, otherwise it's a yard, AKA IX Shells. By the way, I figured out my name could be N80 Nato. Yo, I'm gonna rebrand. So more than 15 years ago, Tor Onion services were brought to digital life. An ecosystem of onions has been blooming ever since. This is a project where they made a one-of-a-kind digital artwork, a generative art piece derived using private key of the very first onion service. Oh, let's see it in work. Let's see it. I think these are dope. Okay, I thought someone was telling me to move along. Okay, here we go. This is generative art. This is kind of a genre in digital art that you may be familiar with. I sometimes wonder, do you mean art made on a computer when you say generative art? But certainly what it is, you know, some people credit Sol LeWitt as being the first generative artist in so much as it's a rule system or a program that produces itself. This is an LA artist you might know named Rafik Anadol. Trippy. That's awesome. Okay, and then there's a thing called on-chain art, another genre, and this is the actual art that lives on the blockchain itself. Most of this art is pointed to from the blockchain. It lives on a other service, so the actual contract points to it. But some art actually lives on the blockchain. It's the code on the blockchain, and thus the art looks like tech nerd art. It's like code. I mean, this looks like code art, but it's on the blockchain. So this is implemented with metadata and smart contract, both existing on the blockchain. Here's some examples of that. And then, of course, I got a shill finally for Artwrld, this project I'm involved in. This is a project by the artist Artwrld that we're launching with. It's called Festival of Gratitude. It is a series of birthday cakes for dictators, sheikhs, sheikhas, CEOs, and goats. If the 20th century started as the era of the dictator, with World War I giving birth to Dada, the early 21st century is no exception, with the age of the dictator being very much upon us, whether it's someone who's being investigated right now in the United States government, but also across the world. We have Erdogan, we have Modi, we have Bolsonaro. We have a world where the Democrat, and of course here, we're celebrating the birthday, his 69th birthday is coming up, Vladimir Putin, which this is a birthday cake for him. And then this, we will also have available for a large scale, these slices with his visage. And I think we're gonna have an allow list for everybody, so if you wanna get pre-purchase on that. Anyways, I'm shilling. I'm grossly shilling for this project. But all that said and done, I wanna say this, ultimately, the most important thing, and then we'll have artists all present their projects, and they're phenomenal. Digital art's been around a long time. That is not new. And they were a secondary step cousin to the art world because they didn't have an economy the way non-fungible tokens allows. And painting always made more. And I always thought my friends that made great digital art eventually got exhausted by not getting love from the art world, and then went off and worked at Google. My friend Jonah Peretti was an intern at this place, iBeam, and then he started BuzzFeed. I was like, Jonah's like, I'm not getting any love being an anarchist artist. No one cares about digital art. I'm gonna go start BuzzFeed. All right, well, that worked out. But I wanna say digital art, there's so many artists doing so many things that are interesting. It's an extraordinarily important thing. So let's keep the love for artists. And with that said, let's bring out our first artist. I believe it's Glenn Kaino. Give it up for Glenn. I think if he's coming. Here, buddy. Here's your clicker.
How's it going? Hey, hello. Hello, Los Angeles. Early Saturday. Awesome. Great to be here. I just want to start by thanking Nato and Esther and Claudia and the Hammer and everyone for being here. Strange times, interesting times. I'm going to take you through one of my projects. Just by way of background, my studio practice is very heterogeneous. It's always, though, idea-driven, and the ideas take me through sometimes different, complicated, circuitous stories. And this one that I'll talk about today has led to a large-scale NFT project that we can use as a basis for conversation about a few other things. But and then, just by way of other quick background, in that meandering of my career, I have had sort of interesting experiences like at the forefront of different technologies. I was the chief creative officer of a thing called Napster, which is like a peer-to-peer music service, and I was able to help take that to make it legal, and we made the first streaming service ever. And so it's been very interesting to watch and track some of the parallels between distributed art making with distributed music and a few other things that we can talk about later as well. But this project is called Pass the Baton. But if you don't mind, I'm going to segue away from digital into highly analog, away from the future into the past, talk about stories for 5 minutes, and then it'll segue and you'll see how my brain works and how we connect this all together. Is anyone familiar with this image? So this is an image of Tommy Smith, John Carlos, and Peter Norman in 1968 after winning the gold in the 200 men's at the Mexico State Olympics. Tommy performed this salute. I had seen this first when I was in high school, and it impacted me so much as an image of courage and sacrifice that I actually had a 4x5 small image of it, black and white, just like this, taped to the corner of my iMac in my studio. And one day, about 10 years ago, a friend of mine walked into the studio, pointed out, and he said, "Oh, Coach Smith, you want to meet him?" And I was like, look, to be totally transparent, and Tommy knows this if you're watching on stream, I didn't know if he was alive. I didn't know anything about him at that time. I just knew what I thought the image meant to me. But I know that when someone says, "Hey, Coach Smith," like Coach is only the name you tell someone who you call someone who's been your coach. And so I was like, of course I want to meet him. And my friend walked to the corner of the studio and he starts texting somebody and he comes back a few minutes later and he goes, "They want to meet you." And I'm like, get out of town. I had no idea. So I said, "Where do they live?" Turns out they live in Atlanta. So I expedited 2 tickets right then. And 3 days later, I'm at his door in Atlanta and he shakes my hand and he sits me on the couch like y'all and he starts playing the race that he won for me on a VHS tape, step by step narrating everything he's thinking, right? And on like an hour on the hour, his wife Delois, who's also at the time and still is his manager, now my good friend, and also I might say if Delois is watching as well, she's also the mother of Montel Jordan. This is how we do it, and that's how they did it. Exactly, right? So I'm sitting there in the house of Tommy Smith, and this is how we do it, and I'm watching the race, and I'm getting narrated, and an hour on the hour, his wife Delois says, "Tommy, shut up. Glenn, why are you here?" She says, "Tommy will talk all night long if you let him, but we need to know why you're here." And I was like, "Look, I'm a conceptual artist, and I'm not here to sell you anything. I don't actually have an idea. I have an observation, if I may." And they said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, I was born after that happened, so for me it's always been an image, it's been a symbol. But for you, it's highly personal. You shook my hand with that hand. You brushed your teeth with that hand. You drive with that hand. But the rest of us, most of us, we just know that fist up in the air." And so I said, "What if we could collaborate on a project of some sort that allows you to be a witness for this rich history that you've created for all of us to learn from?" And at that point, we were all getting emotional. He says, "What's next?" And I said, "You come to LA and I'll take the arm off your body." And he was like, "What is this voodoo?" And I said, No. I'm going to make it casted. I'm a sculptor. I'm going to make a cast. And so we actually took him to a facility to make a cast of his arm. And this is like an old photo now. And I'll say that when the cast came off, this is just a small, amazing bit of storytelling and history. When the cast came off, he pointed to that little dark spot you see by his glove, right below his glove. There's a dark spot on his arm. He pointed that and he says, "You know what that is, son?" I said, "What is that, sir?" He says, "That's a class muscle." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You only get that muscle from picking cotton. So when I'm up on that stage, I flex it to let everyone know that even if you pick cotton, you're up here with me." And at that point, I obviously was very moved. I asked him if we could actually record and film all of our work and interaction together, which we have done for 10 years. And it's been, and I'll show you some clips of that. But a few months later, maybe 9 months, a year later, we debuted this artwork, which is a 100-foot-long bridge made out of 200 1-meter arm lengths of Tommy Smith's arm at a monument in an exhibition in DC. And I'm happy to say that it's just been acquired by the Smithsonian Museum of American Art as the centerpiece of the new hang. It's really great. But obviously didn't know this when we were doing this, and so I was like, oh man, like we gotta meet President Obama. This is like it was like 2015, and I was like, I'm gonna point this bridge at the White House just as a karmic. I'm gonna put it out into the ether that's gonna happen. Because it was really funny, like what he did was he had, well, go back to this frame. He had a bunch of wish list items, let's say, things that were gaps in history that had yet to be connected. And so we had gone on a 10-year, I have now been on a 10-year journey with him to do things like I was able to call, he was never been on the cover of a Wheaties box. And so this is not actually an artistic representation of Wheaties box. I actually called the CEO of Wheaties and I said, get on the right side of history. 18 months later, we were able to release a Wheaties box with Tommy's image on it, and we got 1.4 billion impressions. It was the most popular, most seen Wheaties box in history. We did a headphone collaboration with the company Beats headphones, and we were able to bring Tommy's story to 4.5 billion people through the course of the headphone collab, and LeBron James wore it 3 times in the NBA Finals. And I'll tell you on the inside, this is a secret thing that y'all don't know, and I know that we're public, but it's like a secret for all of us, is that on the inside when they had me put my name in it, I made the L in Glenn a Lakers L, just so that every team because we gifted it to everyone in the NBA, all the players, and all the opposing teammates had a Lakers L in their ear, and it is not coincidental that we won the championship that year. I'm just saying, when you're getting counter-programmed every day when you're warm-ups, it's meaningful. And so we then documented all of our work together in a film called Withdrawn Arms that we were graciously nominated for an Emmy, debuted at Tribeca Film Festival, and a lot of these stories were in it, and I'll play you the quick trailer for it.
1968, black athletes were expected to perform and shut up. We were dealing with racism. We were dealing with not having a voice. Running became my voice. I knew something had to be done. My next move would be immortalized in history.
He gave us all hope, so I too can do something.
That's a hero.
Is patriotism protesting oppression? Or is patriotism blind allegiance despite everything?
It's a whole different thing to square up with white supremacy.
Change doesn't happen in America without loss.
After that Olympics, he was ostracized from society.
When I returned home, the only job I could get was washing cars. One day, a car pulled up. They were FBI agents.
Tommy was a victim of a fear of radical thought.
Tommy's dreams had to be altered because of that gesture.
It destroyed what I loved, running, and my family. I hit rock bottom. I needed someone to hold a hand out.
I did not recognize him. I said, there has to be a change.
Somehow, a Japanese-American artist became one of the captains of Tommy Smith's legacy team. Tommy's salute made such an impact on me that I had to collaborate on a project with him. I said, what if we could make a cast of your arm, and then we'll figure out what to make.
I thought it was admirable for him coming and doing this. He took a stand with me.
My projects with Tommy allows you to be a witness of this rich history that salute created.
That history is happening right now.
How can we not let ourselves neglect the next Tommy Smith?
The work that Glenn and Tommy have done is brotherhood. It doesn't matter who you are, we're all in this together.
For 50 years, people have been putting words in my mouth. That fist meant pride. It meant strength. It means togetherness, one as a nation.
It's available on Stars and Apple TV if you want to go buy. So we made this film and got went around the country doing workshops with kids and talking about stuff. And as far as one of the requests and the conversations that really led into the NFT project. The first part of that story was when we first sat down. This is before the Wheaties box and before the Beats headphones. Delois, Tommy's wife, said to me, she says, you don't have any goals for this partnership, but we have 3 goals. And I said, well, that's great. What are they? They said, 1, we want to meet Oprah, for our partnership. And they said, 2, we want to be in the Smithsonian, and 3, we want to meet the president. And this is just so we're clear, President Obama. So this is how long we've been working together. And so I was like, okay, great. And it just so happens that I have, in my past, spent a lot of time working also with Oprah Winfrey. And I had seen her, like after I got that request from them, I saw Oprah a few weeks later. And I said, Oprah, oh my God, I'm working with Tommy Smith. And Oprah is so great. She was like, Tommy Smith. Like she knew exactly, Tommy. And so I said, he would love to meet you. And she said, sure, I'll meet him tomorrow morning. And I was like, I didn't expect that. And so I booked 2 tickets again on my phone, just like I did before, for Tommy, Delta, and I was like, hey, Tommy, I got you the meeting with Oprah, and it's tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and he was says, son, I'm too old to jump on a plane right now to go meet her. We'll do it some other time. And I was like, look, if you all corner me outside at a croissant and you ask me to do 3 impossible things and I do the first one and you pass, I kind of think I'm off the hook for all three, right? That's like the rule. Apparently not so much though, because February, the year later of 2016, Dolores called me up. She said, "I just want to remind you, you're on the clock." And I said, "What does that mean? I gotta know what that means for like fantasy basketball. What does that mean for like for you?" And she said, "We want to meet the president, not an ex-president." And I was like, "Oh, that's a gauntlet throwdown or a glove." And so I called everyone, all the curators that I know, anyone that knew President Obama. I know a couple of his really good friends. I called a lot of people, and the answer I got was everything from no to hell no. You know, and then to like one time they were like, "Oh, we'll get you in the fall," and I'm like, I hope he's campaigning for someone in the fall. And then they finally said, "Well, if you can come to DC on official business, and you know, we can maybe up your security clearance and see if we can get you in and tell the president you're there." And they didn't know that I had just met Lonnie Bunch, and who's on the film. And Lonnie, most notably, did not have yet anything for his new museum from Tommy Smith. And this is before the artwork was even, a thing. And so what we did was we got to DC, with Tommy, and then the president invited us in. And on the way into the Oval Office, I had made this drawing for President Obama of a Tommy actually passing a baton to the fourth runner in the first time to world record race. We gave it to President Obama, and on the back, Tommy wrote this inscription. He said, "I can only imagine the length of passage, but most importantly, the baton has not been dropped. Congrats on a magnificent 8." And then, this is like my little humble brag photo though, which is there's 4 people smiling, not 5, and that's because like when I saw the photographer up there, I thought he was a 6th person. I was trying to get Tommy to stand where I'm standing, but President Obama was like, he goes like, "Glenn, it's time to take a photo." And I was like, "Oh, but I didn't practice what to do." And he sees me like juggling people around. He goes, "Hey, from the moment y'all walked in here, it's been meet Tommy. Come here, birthday boy." And he puts his hand like this. And I didn't know how to stand with the president. Is it like B-boy style? What are we doing? And so my hand like accidentally comes in, and you don't see my hand because it's in his jacket, and I'm giving him a squeeze, and that's what that is, right? But this whole time, just to fast forward, this whole time, we were being asked, obviously, to do NFT projects, and my background in digital work. Got back to Tommy's house, and I saw this, which was the actual baton from my drawing that we gave to the president. By way of just other background, 2 weeks after our visit, President Obama went on the DNC for Hillary, and he said, I'm going to be a private citizen. I'm going to pass the baton. And in 12 speeches, he said, "Pass the baton in 2 weeks' time frame from our visit." Now, I'm not going to say that we wrote that or put that in his head, but it happened, and that's just fact. But I went to go to his house. I saw this baton, and I said, "Man, that looks amazing. That's like a sculpture." He had used the red 70s label maker tape to like put his team names and the split times on there, and it looked like a beautiful sculpture. And it also looked like a lightsaber. And if y'all are like Star Wars fans like me, every Jedi has his own lightsaber. And I was like, "Oh man, that would be amazing." And I didn't want to do transactional NFT. We have done that as well. I wanted to use a smart contract, which we could talk about later on, as a conceptual gesture. And so we said, what would we do if we could do this? And so what we did was actually we deconstructed the baton, made it different colorways, made different grip tapes, and we put different names on the baton, and we generated 4 teams of 1,968 batons and signifying for the year, and made over 7,800 batons. And the teams and the names we put on there were some of the biggest and most active civil rights leaders of the moment. Everyone from John Legend to Megan Rapinoe from the pop cultural side to Nsé Ufot, Latasha Brown, and fantastic people, David Johns and Josh Dubois, Joe Teka-Iti helped us put the whole thing together, and we assembled a coalition of 80 million people that the batons, when they went to public mint, served. We raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for these nonprofits because the Spark contract was written so that some money went to production, but the rest of the money all went to these nonprofits, to create a scalable economy for that work. And then we also committed through the utility of the baton to host ongoing conversations about social justice. And we just did one a few weeks back over at Pace Gallery with Bray Baker, Latasha Brown, Elisha Shabazz, and Nsé Ufot, and a bunch of people. And and I'd say just in conclusion, one of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight or today, and have y'all tonight, like it's dark, it's morning, it's not even brunch. Is a word that I think that is really, for me, but more so than any of the technical conversations, more so than any of the economic conversations. There's a word that I think, like, for me, defines this opportunity and this moment for NFT in the landscape, and that's community, right? And I think, because one thing is about NFT landscape is that, like, it's an opportunity for a community to get together to agree that something is valuable. And like, we're all in the room here because you're curious, right? But we're a community. The Hammer, we've assembled people together, and you're curious about if this art form or this medium has value. All the CryptoPunks, everything that Nato talked about is great. Communities have gotten together, and what they've done is they've expended their fiat to assert themselves that these things have value. And our work with Pass the Baton was this idea is that, can we, in this nascent infrastructure, can we suggest the idea that human rights has value, that equality has value, that the value systems of the people that we placed on the baton are enough to create an ecosystem of value and to do that. And we were very heartened that thousands of people bought the batons and joined our community, and we have a robust Discord now. And so I think that one of the things that is the underpinning, despite all the confusion of all the different technological components, which I'm sure will be untangled and then retangled over the course of the next several years, one thing that is not fungible or changeable in this circumstance is the fact that it all is about humans. And it's all about us, and it's all about value systems and what our motivation is. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, and thank you for having me. Awesome. Bye. See y'all soon back.
Hello. Hey, I wish I had Obama in my presentation. Damn, I was supposed to go after that? All right. Well, GM, as they say, you didn't put that in your presentation. Yeah. GM, good morning. So I'm Mieke Marple, and I'm going to talk about the Medusa collection, which is a set of 2,500 generative art NFTs that I launched in fall of last year. And as with Glenn, I'm going to start with an analog precedent. So the Medusa collection really starts here. This is an exhibition of paintings that I did in 2019 called Bad Feminist, after the book by Roxane Gay, which was the first time she talked about being gang raped as a 12-year-old girl. And this is also the first time I worked with Medusa as a subject matter. And I chose Medusa to work through some of my own feelings of monstrousness. As some of you might know, I used to be an art dealer. I was co-owner of Night Gallery from 2011 to 2016, ages 25 to 30 roughly. And when I left at the end of 2016 to focus on myself and do some deep soul searching, it was a really shocking transition for me. My inbox went from 50 to 100 emails a day, it felt like, to 1 or 2 generic emails a week. And I took this falling off of attention really personally. I felt like something was wrong with me, something was monstrous, that I'd been so loved. I can tell I'm getting emotional. That I'd been so loved, and then it just like evaporated. So I started drawing Medusa. And I didn't know Medusa's whole story when I first started drawing her, but I quickly found out that Medusa had actually been raped by the god Poseidon and turned into a monster by his wife, the god Athena. So Medusa, the person we think of as the quintessential female monster, is actually a survivor of sexual abuse. Yeah. And this, I felt like, just spoke volumes. It spoke volumes to the ways in which we so rarely scratch under the surface to discover why monsters are monsters. And also that so many of these quote unquote monsters start off as victims of abuse, often sexual. And on a personal level, drawing Medusa better helped me see and understand myself, how my own history with sexual abuse fed into my own self-perception of monstrousness. So this was a really healing, really personal, really heartfelt show. But I was really aware of the limitations of exhibiting paintings in a gallery space. First of all, there's only 4 paintings that could be owned by 4 people max. I also felt like the status of the paintings as luxury commodities overshadowed some of the content. And there's no good way for me to have a dialogue, like have a real connection with people that might have come into the show and been touched by the content. So fast forward to 2021, my partner told me about a friend of his who had sold a painting and then separately sold an image of a painting. And this I thought was the craziest thing I ever heard. Why would anyone pay money for an image they could pull off a website for free? But I'm a business-minded person, and if there's a way to make more money without doing much more work, I am game. So I did that. I minted, my first NFTs were images of paintings, not these, but a different pair. And they sold right away to a great collector who immediately afterwards put me in a really prestigious benefit NFT auction with 8 other artists, one of whom was Beeple. And this was 2 weeks after his $69 million sale. So I had just minted my first NFT 2 weeks earlier, and suddenly I was basically in the same room, in the same show with Beeple. And my NFT was literally like underneath his on the Nifty Gateway screen. His ended up selling for 69 million, or his in that is sold for 6 million. But mine sold for the humble price of the equivalent of 25-something thousand, which was much more than my actual paintings went for. So NFTs had my attention, needless to say. But I wasn't really convinced that just pictures of paintings were the most interesting thing I could do. So I kind of observed the space for a few months, knowing that I wanted to do something ambitious, unsure what that would be or like how to do it authentically for me and my practice. Until I came across this. How many people have heard of World of Women? All right, that's good. So you've already been introduced to PFP collections, these collectible sets of like 10K unique artworks. So World of Women was the first like really successful 10K collectible that depicted and targeted women. And the thing about these collectibles, these are actually also made generatively, just like some of the generative art you saw by Rafik and IX Shells. But the thing about owning these is that by owning one, you don't just own the artwork, it's also a ticket into a larger community, a community that gets together at conferences, that has contests, that has subgroups with common interests, that's on a Discord, etc. And this was a real lightning bolt moment for me because as an art dealer, I had also very much been a community manager. I had put on events like once or twice a week sometimes. But when I left to focus on being an artist, my life was very solitary. I was sort of head down in the studio, just focusing on my work. But with this, I saw how to be a community organizer, as an artist, and how to like integrate these two very real sides of myself into like a single bigger vision. So that is what brings me to the Medusa collection. And thanks for that. So the Medusa collection is made very similarly to these 10K PFP collections, where though instead of having one central image, I actually had 6, and they're all different Medusas based on Medusa sculptures by famous Italian art historical men, Bernini, Canova, Cellini. And each of these Medusa heads was basically a very large Photoshop file of 70, 80 layers that were categorized into like 8 or 9 categories. And so basically how it worked is an algorithm would come and randomly choose a different variable option from each of the different categories and put it together into a single complete digital Medusa painting. And it did this 2,500 times, which might sound like a lot, but I actually once calculated the total possible permutations, and it's something like 2.5 billion. So it's a relatively small sample size. But this project, in ways that I'm still digesting, really changed my life. It changed my relationship to art. It changed my relationship to myself. In handing over some of the creative decision-making to an algorithm, I really learned how to let go of control. And it's kind of like really like confronting your deepest fear, right? That like you can just like let go and trust that something bigger than you has like got your back. And in doing that, like I could tell like the work was so much less inhibited. It was so much bolder. It was so much freer than anything I'd made before. And I felt like it was like reflecting my deepest subconscious back to me. It was so much wilder, and it was so much more rageful than I knew I had in me. And it also met a lot of the unfulfilled needs that I had from earlier. I was able to reach a much broader audience. I was able to directly connect with that audience over Twitter or Discord or in-person meetups. And I think more than all of that, I really felt that I was making contemporary art, that I was a contemporary artist, that I was using the tools of our time to reflect the moment we're in, that I was inserting my own personal poetic glitch into this language of computers and this endless stream of digital content that we take for granted often, that I was inserting, just a moment of self in that. So, I think a lot of you are here to discover if NFTs are for you. And I guess what I would leave you with is, if you're posting your work on Instagram, if you're using email, if you're doing any kind of digital mock-ups, you're already a digital artist. And we live in a digital era. And I think it actually behooves everyone here to bring conscientiousness into that, to bring intention into that, and be the most contemporary artist that you can. And I'll leave it with that, but thank you so much for having me. Oh, I forgot. There.
Wow. Hi. My name is Pfeiffer, and super happy to be here. I'm going to take a different approach because I think I might be the only one of the four who's like just hasn't actually made an NFT yet. So I'm really going analog, not analog, but pre-NFT. I'm very excited to be working with Nato Thompson and the folks at Artwrld on an NFT project, and that's why I'm here, actually. Why they invited me, I guess, has partially to do with the fact that I come from a background in video and digital video specifically, starting in the late 90s. So, and in the late 90s, I found it kind of the most native way to structure a video, to just take a short piece of found footage and just loop it back and forth, because that's what all the video editing software does anyway. I actually come from a printmaking background. And yeah, now from 2022 perspective, it looks like, like a meme or something like that. But really it was just kind of like reflecting the language of the software itself and what it sort of wants to do in the editing suite, and using that as a format. Yeah, so Artwrld invited me to think of a project, and I happened to be talking to a friend who was telling me about this thing that was happening just over the past couple of years during COVID, in which towns in the Philippines where a lot of people had lost their jobs had started playing this game called Axie Infinity, and doing things within Axie Infinity that would, which is a crypto-based game, to earn crypto, which ultimately could be taken out of the crypto world and turned into real money. So basically people were playing the game as a job to replace jobs that were lost in sort of, I guess, traditional traditional fields up until COVID.
Axie Infinity is a digital pet community where players can sell their in-game characters for real money using the Ethereum blockchain. Players can breed their Axies to discover exciting new combinations. Axies start off as eggs and require love and attention from their owners to grow up. Take care of your Axies and earn experience points by completing daily activities. Use experience points to level up your Axies and unlock new abilities which can be used in battle. You can even trade your Axies for cryptocurrency on our marketplace. Find out more on axieinfinity.com. Available now.
I just downloaded that from YouTube last night, and what I wanted to draw from that, and what I find interesting is that what seems to happen in the game is starting from breeding, and then nurturing, and then ultimately going into a sort of competition, and then how that relates to the marketization or like the financialization is interesting to me in the way that it sort of mimics fundamental biological or life patterns. It's basically showing you a kind of life cycle from cradle to grave, in which you control and monetize the process. It's the process of production on a biological level, sort of melded with production on a digital level. And I intuitively find that intriguing. For me, it blurs the boundary between what one would consider, one's unique identity or lifespan, and what it might mean to bring oneself into the digital realm, or into the realm of cryptocurrency, into a marketplace. The kind of the gray area-ness of it intrigues me. So, yeah, that's what I was thinking about in relation to this NFT project. And where it led was just, the Philippines had an election just a couple of weeks ago, and one of the candidates was Manny Pacquiao. And it really intrigued me just the coincidence of, probably the most monetized and visible athlete from the Philippines becoming a politician. And actually, he has a sort of triple life as a person who gives sermons, as a religious leader. So the kind of merging of professional sports, entertainment, like nation-state politics, and religion, to me, blurs the boundaries again between what, in the previous century we considered very important to keep separate, church and state. And the role of these institutions inherited from the 20th century, really like the inherited political categories of the previous century, and how they are transforming in this era of new technologies, and how they really relate to the propagation of belief systems, seems to me like, I want to say, immersive in a way. So the idea that I had with Artwrld was to do a series of NFTs based on all of the fights of Manny Pacquiao in which he lost. And as a video editor, what I'm doing is going in and working with the material of video, almost like a painter, and kind of breaking it down into layers, building it back up again, playing with the relationships between foreground and background, to transform the image. So actually, I wanted to go back to something that Nato said at the beginning, that one of the things that art can add to the conversation today about NFTs has something to do with like consciousness of media. And that's my favorite thing. Like that's in a way the playground that I choose to play in, and I'm very interested in what media is and what mediation means. I was telling folks earlier today that I thought that what's happening in this conference is like a meeting of witches. And what I mean by that is it occurred to me that as much as we might be coming from different backgrounds, one thing that really, to me, unites artists and technologists is an interest in mediation. And I think of mediation as like a meta element. It's like the water that the fish swims in. And there's like a famous, well, not famous, but a Jewish friend of mine said that you can encapsulate the Jewish critical tradition in the phrase, the fish can't see the water. It seems like an enigmatic thing to say. But one of the ways I take it is that as an editor, when I'm editing, I'm taking found material and I'm doing something to it. And usually the material I work with has protagonists in it. But in a sense, I am also a protagonist, but I'm made invisible in the end. You can't see my hand. And yet, I am asserting my subjectivity through the material. There's like an analog to that in, say, like a boxing match, where you have opponents. And that fight is being mediated by a referee. So all that's happening is I'm taking out the opponent. In a way, you're seeing an intensified, you're honing in on the sort of hits to the body that are occurring, and you're seeing the mediation of the referee kind of dancing around and is almost like a third party in that situation. I also read at some point a thing about the relationship between jokes and humor and revolutions and innovation, that they all have a similar structure in that if you break it down structurally, there's always three parties involved. In a joke, one person is acting on another in a way that sort of they don't realize. They're the butt of the joke. But there's always a third party in that, which is the viewer. The person playing the joke on the other person and the person who's the butt of the joke don't know that the joke is happening. And in fact, there is no joke unless that third person laughs. So in a way, I find it intriguing. In a way, like, there's so many narratives that are familiar that appear to have two protagonists or antagonists, but in fact, there's always a third. And I link that back to an idea of what mediation is. So what intrigues me about mediation is that it's a kind of necessary third party to a conflict, let's say, or to an exchange. And yet the effectiveness of that third party is based on their relative invisibility or their relative ambiguity to the situation. It's kind of the relationship between foreground and background. There's a project that Kaino has done where he's studied magicians. And a famous performance space for magicians here in LA, I believe. I'm super intrigued about that project because it's a similar thing. The magician in some ways is like a mediator of perception, or let's say like sleight of hand is all about the mediation. And the mediation isn't complete until it's sort of it's completed in the mind of the perceiver. And in a sense, it's a negotiation in which say like in sleight of hand, the sleight of hand artist is aware of certain inherent blind spots and uses them to produce an effect that appears, that defies kind of logical reasoning. I feel like there's a relationship to NFTs in the sense that, it's occurred to me that in a sense what the blockchain does is it reveals or brings into the foreground the mediation aspect, which seems almost like a contradiction in terms. If the effectiveness of the mediating element has to do with its relative invisibility, what does it mean to actually foreground the mediation process? I also associate the mediation process with change or revolution. It's really taking everything that's expected and then pivoting on it in order to produce an effect that produces change, a change. And so, I mean, it seems obvious to me that in a way the motivator behind NFTs has to do with a kind of, the fact that we're in a moment of like extreme change. Whether, technology is responsible for it, or whether technology, is seeking to provide a kind of way through it is debatable, but, both in terms of not just the technological evolution, but obviously that we're at a state of war on a global level. So there is a lot of conflict, and as Walid Rad's project points out, there's, in a way, like new types of control structures or kind of social formations that appear to like kind of jump over the assumption of, say, like democratic grounding and go back to like feudal systems. There's something very nonlinear about like the behavioral patterns that are showing up now. So sorry, I kind of get lost in it, but in some ways I want to take this opportunity to address, to go back to Manny Pacquiao. And in a sense, what I was thinking following gaming was about sports NFTs. Like, I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's a thing called NBA Top Shots, which is like a multi-billion-dollar thing now. And it's sort of like, well, here. Oh.
So essentially what NBA Top Shots is that you can collect and own official NBA moments. Like, you can own that exact moment in NBA history. It's almost like buying and trading NBA basketball cards, but rather than having them on a piece of cardboard, you actually have a little clip of that moment, and you own that moment digitally, which means that it can never get damaged or destroyed. It doesn't have to get graded like basketball cards do, and it's always in perfect mint condition. But the part that really sucked me in as a collector, because you guys know me, I'm a collector of sneakers and pretty much anything that I can collect, is that each one of these moments have a serial number, and some moments are significantly rarer than others. So like common moments, there are tens of thousands of those available. Rare moments, there are low thousands of those available. And then legendary moments, I believe there are only 99 or less of those moments available, which means some of them are insanely rare, like this Joel Embiid assist. As you can see, there are only 50 of these Series 1 Holo 2020 moments that exist. Moments like these have value because of the mint size and added value for badges. This moment has the Top Shot debut badge, meaning that the play feature is the player's first moment to exist on NBA Top Shot. The following items are what make a moment valuable to collectors. Other variables collectors tend to keep an eye on are things like the box score and what the play means in terms of the end result of the game.
So yeah, I mean, it seems obvious, and like, I mean, what I want to say about sports is the reason why since the late 90s, when I started working with digital media, I gravitated to sports is not because I have a background in it, like I don't. Oh, really? It's actually more because I feel like sports is, I mean, as we, it is so like important to filter in society. And because it's so familiar and people love it or hate it, and it means many things, like in Glenn Kaino's project, it becomes like the medium for a kind of political expression in certain historical situations by virtue of its popularity, like by virtue of the fact that it speaks to everybody in a way. Like in some ways, the invisibility of my hand as an editor becomes like the most complete in when playing with images from the field of sports. Like who I am and what I'm doing and what effect I propose to have is actually overshadowed by like your familiarity or hatred or love for sports or for the athletes. So I could be doing like 3 or 4 or 5 different things, and I don't have to reveal myself. I mean, in some ways it also, I won't even go on. So, I mean, the other thing about sports is just that obviously athletes are people who live on the court. They are monetized, their careers can be very short and it can be very brutal on the body. So like Axie Infinity, we're talking about a game that's monetized and that the most basic biological functions of the person become the vehicle for participation in the game. For me, athletes in that way, like artists, become almost like an every person representing all of us, the way that we live within economic structures. So I'm just going to end by saying, like, Artwrld recently told me that they talked to a lawyer, and the lawyers now like put the fear of possible lawsuit around intellectual property because of the use of an image like Pacquiao. And so for now, we're putting a pause on the project. And they asked me if I had any other ideas. And it so happened I was working on another project. I just want to mention it briefly. But I'm going to show you this first. Artwrld actually put this on my radar. It's an NFT project called Juneteenth, and it seeks to address the kind of the disparity between black creators on TikTok who invent dances that then go viral, but other people get the credit for them, for the dances. They become so popular, they get billions of views, but the original creator is sort of like left in the dust. So there's this project that seeks to.
This next part's my favorite part of this time to shine. Gonna do the two-step, then cowboy boogie. Grab a sweetheart and spin out with him. Do the whole down.
What you're seeing is the original creators are being 3D scanned, turned into holograms, which can be brought into the metaverse and can also be distributed to appear virtually on your phone in whatever background you happen to be in. So it's about like increased circulation. And I just have a question that I want to put on the table, which is, you know, it occurs to me that there is a potential discrepancy between the sort of social justice intentions of a project like this and what the actual effect is. And there's a question for me of whether the tendencies of the medium, or say the mediation vehicle, which has in a way a brain or a logic of its own, and is not human, but market-driven, could it not possibly overwhelm the sort of the humane intentions of a project? And so, whoops. Oh, I'm just going to quickly, I'm thinking about living statues in the subway and how they might be engaged as an almost like a cipher for our current moment. These performers who have developed the craft to be in the midst of people, commuters who are going by, and stay absolutely still and seek kind of, you know, monetary compensation for this performance. And there's a number of them in New York that I think the fact that they're painted gold speaks of like value, the kind of, I don't know, the mashing of like the person and the object and value and almost like borderline like homelessness. To me, like resonates on an uncanny level with, you know, what might be like a collective sort of future. That's it.
Hello. Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see all of you today, all of your beautiful NFT curious faces. Let's get started, shall we? We're gonna keep it cute, keep it fun. Oh, I don't know what that was about, but. Sorry, I gotta ask you to forward. Okay. Well, here we go. Here's me. Welcome. My name is Sarah Zucker, aka The Sarah Show. If you spend any time on NFT Twitter, you may recognize my lovely, long-standing avatar here and all her lady boss finery. This is an artwork by my spouse, Bronwyn Lundberg. And the reason I'm here today, I believe, is because I have been editioning my artwork as NFTs since early 2019, which has given me this very unique, very psychedelic viewpoint of this entire phenomenon, as it began with a very small number of art nerds like myself, just experimenting, and blew up into the zeitgeist that we all know today. So, a bit about my artwork. This is my art, and this is for Esther, who loves cats, I hear. My artwork could be described as digital analog video visions. I make use of the interplay of obsolete and cutting-edge technology to evoke a dimension of my own imagination. I have been working with digital and screen-based art for over a decade now, having started originally as a photographer. And I've sort of seen this entire moment, of screen-based art, or as Nato was saying about performance art. In the past, we occupied this very strange no man's land of the fine art landscape, where folks could, admit, yes, that is fine art, but since we didn't fit neatly into the gallery model, it was often hard to be acknowledged or supported as such. I've been in Los Angeles for about a decade. I used to curate a visual music show called Prism Pipe, maybe some of you are aware of, that used to play in Echo Park and was a celebration of video and GIF art at a time when animated GIFs were becoming ubiquitous on the internet. And yet, those of us creating them were still sort of being treated like, a bunch of punk kids smoking cigs behind the gym. Like, we were not treated as serious artists, and it was seen as sort of sacrosanct in a way. And so my artwork, again, I've really leaned into the use of obsolete mediums, specifically VHS. And it's not just because it looks cool, though it does look cool. Thank you. I see the use of these vintage mediums as a type of aesthetic intervention. It takes the viewer, it's something that's recognizable, it's something of our collective past, and so it grabs people. It's this Trojan horse of nostalgia, that makes the viewer sort of open up, and then I sneak on in there with my little sneaky Cheshire Cat artist ways to bring them these ideas that I'm channeling from my own experience. And so, as an artist who began editioning my work in this way back in 2019, I could see from those early days that NFTs are a very simple technology at their base. They are simply a container. That is all they are, and yet that is truly revolutionary, considering that they are able to contain things that previously have been considered non-objects. Screen-based art is a non-object-based type of artwork. Therefore, it was always very difficult to collect in the past. It's not to say it wasn't done, and I know you're going to hear from people today who've talked about the history of collecting digital and screen-based art, but it was not at a large scale, shall we say, prior to this ability to create a container for this type of artwork. And so in the early days, and I first began releasing my work as single editions on the marketplace Super Rare in April 2019, and I've had the good fortune to release work through many of the major platforms and try them all out, see what they all have to offer. in those early days, it was something that was, in theory, a way to get support for our artwork, because we could recognize, just as a photographer would make a print of a photograph and then be able to sell that print edition to a collector, we as digital artists were now making these editions of our artwork and could sell them to theoretical collectors that might one day exist. I often joke that in those early days we were like Fraggles, like that you'd get a pebble from your friend and you go, oh, what a beautiful pebble. And then you'd go to your other artist friend and go, here, I want you to have this beautiful pebble. Because we were all sort of trading the same $50 worth of Ethereum between us and collecting each other's editions. And while that's incredibly like adorable, very Care Bear sort of way of being, I look back on it now and realize we were essentially establishing proof of concept for what has now become a multi-billion-dollar market for NFTs, both in the landscape of fine art and in the landscape of collectibles. So that's a bit about me and my history with all of this, and I've clung through it. You've heard others mention that last year was sort of the big watershed moment. In February of last year, there was a $69 million sale of an artwork or cumulative artworks of the artist Beeple at Christie's. And what was so strange about that to me, and I guess unexpected to me as someone, again, who began working with this technology before Beeple, and there were a number of us who were back then, is I just wasn't expecting it all to mature as quickly as it did. And I was not expecting it to have the backlash that it had. Not exactly in the way it did. And those two things are correlated, right? I think the fact that this matured as fast as it did, is inextricably linked from the coronavirus pandemic. In March 2020, I had been minting my artwork for about a year at that point. And I don't think that it is a coincidence that March 2020 is both the point in time when I had to go inside like everyone else and stop seeing my friends and stop going places. And it is also the point in time where I, for the first time in my life as a professional working artist, began selling my artwork regularly. And, it's funny, there's an interesting correlation even to the Renaissance, right? If you look at the Renaissance, and there's a lot of very positive people in this space on Twitter who love to make these comparisons to the Renaissance. And some of them are maybe a little overzealous, but the one that I think holds a lot of water is this idea that the Renaissance followed the plague, right? The Italian High Renaissance followed a plague that decimated Europe. And so I think in a certain way, we're seeing a similar thing here. There's this interesting push and pull in society that we endured this and are continuing to endure this very intense social juggernaut that was COVID. And it pushed culture through a Play-Doh spaghetti making machine into all these odd shapes we weren't expecting. And so with the closing of galleries, with the cancellation of art fairs, everyone had to go online, and everyone was terrified and looking around and going, well, what now? What does life look like now? And there were those of us who were already extremely online, and we went, hey everybody, we're here. Come on over, we have something to show you. And it took about a year, and it really gained steam. So I bring this all up because what I want to show you today is a series I made in March of 2021. My art practice is often transmuting intense things I am personally grappling with into humor and joy and delightful weirdness. So in March of 2021, with all of this grand noise suddenly around me, and my own experience of my art practice leveling up in a very intense way, I created my series called The Cassandra Complex, which is a story at once ancient and familiar. This is a style I work with. She's not animating, but imagine it. This is a style I work with that I've developed that I call video paintings. And I specifically create these using a vintage video painter device that I begged my parents to get me for Hanukkah about every year in my, in my childhood, and eventually got one for myself. So it's all created on VHS tape. These all exist, all my artworks exist physically in that way. But I like to do this dance between the material and the spirit realm, where the work becomes digital. And so the Cassandra Complex was the first of what I'm now thinking of as sort of portfolios. Again, my background as a photographer gave me this gift entering the NFT space, realizing these are just editions. It's very simple. A lot gets made of them, like they're the second coming or they're the Antichrist. They're editions, and it's not that big of a deal. It is a huge deal, but it's also not that big of a deal. And so the Cassandra Complex was a way I was already in March of 2021 starting to see a lot of these early works I had released, these single editions I'd released on Super Rare, started reselling, secondary market sales, and already I was, as an artist, contending with, okay, it's time to evolve my practice a little bit. There's a lot of demand for my work, and it's never been my intention to only make art that is available to a very, select few who are able to afford certain levels. And so I created this series as a way to, again, thinking about like photography portfolios, a way of telling a little tale, a little allegory through my art in these limited editions. And it began with this piece, which I called a launch card, the Cassandra Complex. And this was actually available open for 5 minutes. These are sometimes referred to as open editions. This launch card mechanism is something I came up with in conjunction with the platform I was releasing with. This was released on its own smart contract, standalone smart contract, through a platform called Blank Art. And we wanted to do this idea of the launch card almost like as though if you were to go to a vernissage of a show, you would get, maybe like an exhibition card, a little something that was, with some artists in time, even those little ephemeral postcards become valuable, become, collector's items. And so that was my thinking with this. And it was available for 0.1 ETH. It was available in a very affordable price point for anyone who wanted one. And it was a way then to go, I really want people of varying levels to be able to participate with this mechanism. And so a quick primer on the Cassandra Complex and what it means, if you're unfamiliar. I often work with myth, and I kind of infuse my personal experience and vibe with myth. Cassandra was a princess of Troy, and in the myth, the way to sum her up is she was given the gift of prophecy with the curse to never be believed. And so you may see where I'm going here with this, and I'll start us off here with our, oh, there we go. That's how she looks. So this is the first edition in the Cassandra Complex, Apollo's Gift. Surprise, this gift is really a curse. So Cassandra was, a priestess of Apollo, and Apollo gave her this gift of prophecy to go, guess what, girl, you can see the future. Isn't that awesome? And she was like, yeah, cool, great. And then he was like, also, by the way, like, could I get a little something, something? And she was like, oh yeah, no, like, sorry, I don't think of you like that. Like, I thought we were just friends, like didn't realize I like had to put out to like get, favor. Cool, awesome, hashtag me too. And so, so this is my little take on that of like a present, a gift that contains a little stank on the back end. Surprise, this gift is really a curse. Apollo was mad that Cassandra wouldn't put out, so he said, oh, okay, well, yeah, you have the gift of prophecy, but no one's ever going to believe you. And so that story has played out for people, early adopters, early visionaries, and just, women throughout the history of time. So this was the first edition, and then the second edition in this series. It's Cassandra's vision. Oh, the ecstasy. She can see how it all connects and what is yet to come. This is her, my visionary, my version of Cassandra here. And, I am not saying I am Cassandra. I want this, it's open for interpretation. I do think, again, knowing when I created this project, and it was speaking to really collectively the experience of being an artist, having been a professional working artist for a decade at that point, and knowing how revolutionary this technology would be for artists as a class of people. You saw earlier, Nato was showing you things, and you saw the very first NFT by Kevin McCoy. It was done through an experiment, I believe, at iBeam in New York. I saw that in 2014, and that was around the time I was curating this show, Prism Pipe, of GIF and new media artists. And I saw these experiments they were doing with blockchain. The Ethereum blockchain wasn't even live yet in 2014. And it just like clicked for me. It was like, oh my God, this is going to change everything for people who do the kind of work that I do. And there are a lot of people who do the kind of work that I do. We get lumped into this sort of insulting title of being called content creators, sort of dystopian way of saying artist. Because historically, or at least during the Web 2 era or the social media era, we were seen as the providers of the content, that which is what made people want to go on social media. And yet we were put in this position. The artist writer Rips made a great graph about this that I saw maybe around that time, that at that time, the way we as artists who worked in the digital realm supported ourselves was we would make cool shit, and then we would wait for emails. And that was it. It was this sort of faith-based workflow of, if I make something cool, if it goes a little viral, maybe I'll get an email from Doritos, and they'll ask me to make like a, Cool Ranch chip GIF. And that's how I'll support my art studio. That's how I'll make, that's how I'll make this work. And I consider myself one of the fortunate artists that did sort of make that work for a long time. And so again, I found out about NFTs in 2014. The Ethereum blockchain launched in 2015. And that was when I started seeing, these groups, these new media groups I was involved with, people starting to debate theoretically what this ability would mean for artists, because the Ethereum blockchain was also the advent of what we call smart contracts. Again, a lot of this can feel very arcane. Smart contracts are just like regular contracts. They just exist in a way that can be implemented on the blockchain. And so I just knew, I was like, the second this becomes available to me, I have to experiment with this. I was very involved. My work has gotten a lot of views on Giphy. I've had 6.8 billion views of my GIFs on Giphy. That's like almost the population of Earth. And yet people often ask me like, well, how much money did you make from that? And I go, that's going to be a zero, my friend. That's going to be a zero on that. And that was just standard. And it still is standard for most artists, that you are paid in this faith-based concept of exposure, that your work is seen, therefore you should be grateful. And yet the image I use for that is like having a running faucet that's just shooting resources out, but you don't have a bucket. You don't have a bucket. You don't get to collect any of those resources. You know who does have a bucket? Facebook. So that's what we're talking about here. It's absolutely something that it's on a social level. And to me, this project specifically, Cassandra Complex, was speaking to the experience of being a member of the artist class and having this oracular moment of, whoa, 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 this little thing is gonna snowball. And it means a big, big, big difference for artists, digital and otherwise. Well, so that was the fun part of it. And then and then here's what happened, guys. Here's what happened in March of 2021. The Queen says no. She says, absolutely not. We cannot allow these ideas to take hold. I don't like it. I don't like what it means. I reject it completely. And the Queen here, to me, represents a lot of different folks, and really a sentiment more than anything. A sentiment that I think, again, like anything myth-based, is as old as humanity itself. And that sentiment is one that goes, I'm seeing something new that I don't understand, that is definitely changing the way the things I'm in control of are handled. Therefore, I do not want it. I did not order this. Please take this back to the kitchen. I don't care if this is what's for dinner. I don't want it. And for me, when I say I was surprised by the backlash, what really surprised me was that there were so many people who I had long known to be champions of the digital arts, who, when this moment happened, this moment meaning the Beeple sale, the proverbial rock being lifted up and all of us little critters being exposed to the light, people who I had long known to be champions of the digital arts joined in with the chorus of voices saying, this is bad, and these are bad people doing this. And I gotta tell you, my experience being there, and at that point already being very well regarded within the community, the NFT community, and having a long history of my own experience in art at that point, it encouraged harm towards artists. And people were getting death threats, people were being attacked. I had a number of artists I had curated, who I had a good relationship with, who were sending me violent messages saying they thought I was a bad person, that I was working with this. How dare I work with this? Didn't I know that it's bad? Every single thing about it is bad. And it's something that I hope will be discussed more today. I would by no means tell you that this is a perfect technology. We are in the dial-up modem era of this. It is clunky, it is inelegant, it often does not work the way we want it to work. As was mentioned, it's having difficulty scaling now that so many people want to participate in it. But this was something that was pioneered by artists, and I guarantee you that artists are still the ones driving it forward. They're still the ones taking up these tools and out of their own just artistic curiosity going, ooh, what can we do with this? And to me, that is one of the most beautiful aspects of humanity, that we have people like that who get that way about the things that scare the shit out of everyone else. And I guess my feeling on it was this sort of thing, specifically with seeing arts institutions take this angle of no, not those NFTs. Those are bad things by some bad boys. Absolutely not. Like, we are not deigning to dirty our little paws with those. in my sort of oracular moment, recognizing, well, you're gonna have to. Like, it's it's not gonna go away. I knew it once I started seeing it on CNN, on BBC, like, I was like, I thought we were like 5 years out from all that happening, but COVID like put it all into overdrive. And once the lid was off Pandora's box, that's Pandora's box, you know, you can't put it all back in. And so this was me. This is the level of anger that I allow myself. A silly loser drawing of, because I felt very betrayed in a way, because I've always been someone who cares a lot about the fine arts. So it was just something to reckon with there. And so this is the last edition. This is how I processed all of this, and how when I sort of put my mind to it, how do I think this story is going to go? And I'm standing here in front of all of you. It's a year later now, year and some change. And I think it has gone exactly this way. And this last edition is called Turns Out She Was Right. And it's kind of, again, it's funny, but it's also like dork-sided, that this is historically how these stories always go. You know, the prophet, the witch gets burnt at the stake. The queen gets her head chopped off. Meanwhile, the people celebrate the new ideas, you know, that Pandora's box is never going to contain everything in it again. Once the ideas are out, they're out. These are ideas that touch almost every aspect of our culture, not just fine art. This is a better mousetrap. When I said that smart contracts are just contracts, that's true. So when you think about how much of our life and society is governed by contracts, now that we have a more ironclad way of enacting contracts between people, which again, artists are pioneering it, because as was mentioned, artists are the ones who've historically been even innovating ways a person can get screwed. We are now here a year later, and the fact that all of you are even here, I think a year ago, people would have been scared. People were scared to even be associated with NFTs. People were scared because the violence, the activism that was, really violence in masquerade was so intense and so severe. And there's still a lot of it, that I think people, even if they were curious about NFTs, understood that it was one of those social no-nos. It was like, don't touch that. That's a scarlet letter. Like, you'll be laughed out of your institution or laughed out of your house. And so this is how the story has gone. And happy to report, again, this is why I say artists is a class. This is not a directly personal narrative. That a lot of artists did suffer, and a lot of artists, specifically of marginalized backgrounds, suffered the most because they were asked to answer for this thing. And they were kind of getting it from both sides, that the NFT space, just like all spaces, has issues of inequality. That's not unique to it. It's humanity. It's a space where humans are. And so I think that here we are, a year later, and this is out here, and I think that is a good thing. And I'm just glad that I was able to be there, and I was able to document this feeling, this experience, because NFTs are going to become more and more and more woven into our culture. They're going to become less visible because they're just going to become part of the infrastructure of how things are run in our increasingly digital world. And it's been a joy. It's been a joy to get to be there at the front of it, even if it was a little bumpy at times. So that's all I have to say to you today. Thank you all for coming out and listening.
Hey, let's give it up to artists. So, everybody, we ran a little late. I know. So we're gonna finish at noon. So we got like 13 minutes to do some questions. You want an artist? Can you come up real quick? Let's give it up to him again. I love artists. I love art. How dope is that? Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Mieke. We'll take, I don't know. 1 or 2 questions from you. I think you guys got microphones, right? All right, cool. So and Sarah, I really appreciate, we rounded out with you, and I think like it's really interesting. I gotta love that analogy, the big rock that comes up, and there you are underneath, and you get the spotlight on you. And it's one thing to be a private scene, and it's another thing to be exposed on the popular media stage in general. We all know in social media land, whenever the spotlight comes out, the trolls come out. The trolls come out at night. But it can feel like the negative space can be really overwhelming. But I want to just ask for each of these artists, and if we can all be brief, but it isn't, the artists, I always say people, if someone's in the art world, if they tell you they hate the art world, that's the first sign. You're like, oh, you're deep if you hate the art world, because that's what artists do. But how do you, in terms of like keeping going, and you, Sarah, you were in it, but I want to hear from each of you, how do you navigate the space of like your excitement, but also navigating your personal relationships of a lot of conservativeness in the community? Because you're right, it's not embraced. I mean, oh my God, the face of people I talk to when I say NFT, the look. Like, oh my God, they're like, oh God, I have to deal with this. But anyways, maybe Sarah, you could say briefly, I know you already did that, but may each of us just talk about just like what it's like to be in this space personally for you a bit.
Sure. Yeah, I sort of alluded to this earlier, that the NFT space is funny in that it's this amalgamation of tech people and some art people, but I would say it is very different from what we would call like the fine art space. And there is this mode there of, for lack of a better term, you could call it toxic positivity. Everything is up only, we're all gonna make it. Which, speaks to the euphoria people feel when they're selling art, for artists, it's when they're selling art. For others, it's when they're selling, monkey JPEGs or whatever it is. And when the crypto prices are going up. And as we sit here today, the crypto prices are going down. Yeah. And it feels bad. And it's kind of an interesting moment of reckoning, and I've been through a number of these at this point, having done this for 3 years. It's kind of nice in a weird way, because it's a reset, right? It's this reset. It kind of burns out the more disingenuous parts of all of it, and it's like anything, right? It's like wildfire. It feels very bad to experience on a personal level, but it's actually part of how an ecosystem maintains itself and stays healthy over the long term. And so I have found, I'm a sensitive person, as artists often are, and Twitter is like jacking your nervous system into the nervous system of millions of people. It can be a little overwhelming. So having some good boundaries about Twitter and my phone has helped me a lot. And speaking to this idea, of like being one of the bad people who who makes NFTs out of my art, in a weird way, it's been a gift that I was not well established in the world of fine art before that. Even though I was experienced, even though I was conversant in the language of it, I did not have a long-standing, I did not have a market for my work. I did not have a long-standing, shall I say, galvanized reputation in that space. And so that ended up for me being the right recipe of knowing what I was doing without having the stakes of worrying about what I would be sacrificing. And so I recognize that now, especially for people getting involved with all this now, if they're coming to it from careers in fine art, having perhaps markets for their work, for their object-based work, or institutional support in other ways, I recognize that we have to be mindful that what worked for me isn't necessarily going to work for them. They have stakes. Everybody has their own set of stakes. And so while it was very unpleasant to experience the pushback last year and to bear the brunt of sort of a lot of negativity that was born of what was misinformation. Like I said, it's not to say this is not still an inelegant technology that needs improvement, but there was a lot being spread around about it that was also not factual.
Sure.
It was a lot of sort of boogeyman fear-mongering.
Sarah, so let me just move it to. I'm just going to keep moving it along. I mean, I appreciate that. And listen, it's so crazy because Twitter. I mean, we should probably all start with a Twitter therapy session for all of us, just to kind of talk about boundaries. Mieke, you kind of you were like, how did you make that transition to being an gallery to artist?
Yeah, this is on. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I've had an interesting journey, but I think after for 10 years just so desperately seeking the Artwrld's approval and getting it to a certain extent as a art dealer, and then having this, almost falling out of getting kicked out of the garden or by choice, but also not, just becoming really disillusioned with it. I basically stopped seeking its approval. I basically didn't give a fuck what the Artwrld thought about me. I was like, you know what, F you. And that was great. I was like, it totally gave me the freedom to go into this and not really care what, I don't know, what people would think about my practice or what I was doing. And then the irony is now the Artwrld's coming around to me. Now Artsy hit me up to curate one of their first NFT shows, and I'm speaking here. And I feel like that's always how life works. The second you stop seeking approval is when you start to get it.
That's not true always, certainly. Obviously there are people that don't seek approval and never get approval, and it's, but it's good you got, some love, Mieke. You well deserved. I'm with you. And certainly the NFT thing's come a little full circle. I wouldn't say the Artwrld's embraced it. Wait, just real quick question. Is there a museum what museum's buying NFTs? LACMA? What'd they buy? Well, hey.
They got Krista Kim's work.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, right. Well, I was on a conference with someone from ZKM, and they had a digital arts curator, and the guy was so funny because he's been down in the basement at ZKM in Berlin, and he's like, I don't know, I bought 2 crypto punks, and now the whole museum's interested in me. They had 2 crypto punks, and they were like, wait, what did he buy over there? What? How much is that worth? What? Oh, God, have you talked to that digital arts curator who's been in the basement for 20 years? Paul, how's this going with you, proto NFT man?
Yeah, I'm mostly, I feel like there's a lot of collaboration between formerly separate fields. Yeah. I think that's super exciting. And I just think, the world is changing. I feel like it's great, the sense of how we, as people immersed in the change as it's happening in real time, can bring that into form as a voice to participate in it. It's freaking awesome. Yeah, it's up and down, and people don't know what's going on, but that's nothing new. Yeah. In a way, the engagement is galvanizing.
Love that. And Glenn, you're full circle because of course you got some Napster pastor. And then you got art, and then you got digital art. I mean, I just want to you got a very different kind of trajectory. That this is a real clean fit in a way.
Yeah, first of all, you're awesome at this, and thank you so much. This is hilarious and great. So everyone, give it up for Nato. I mean, Jesus. Yeah, no, I think the Artwrld's awesome. It's like a world, though. There's good parts and there's bad parts, and we get to imagine for a living. And what a crazy thing that we get to actually imagine new worlds for a living and all be in a room where we're talking about speculative futures of technologies and economies and whatnot and value. And so I will my only bit is, because Paul referenced, thankfully, my magic work as well, and in terms of knowing and not knowing. And when I first started to work in magic, and we have Derek Delgadio and I made a big project called In and of Itself. It's on Hulu. And the Good Fire, thank you for the plug. We have a show called The Forest for the Trees in downtown LA, forestla.com. No, but when we started to think about magic, I went to meet a magician, and the first thing he did is I'm not going to do a piece, but he took a coin and he vanished it in thin air, and it was beautiful. First day I sat down with them, and he said, I'll show you how to do it. And I said, what do we do next? He hands me the coin, and he says, take this home and learn how to pick it up 1,000 times. And then tomorrow, I'll tell you how to vanish it. And I said, that's fantastic. I'm going to go do that. Because for me, I was like 4th generation Japanese American. That's like wax off, wax on stuff. Like, I'm like in. And so I said, I will do that, but I'm always going to ask you why. Because I don't really care about learning magic tricks. I care about learning the theory. And he says, when you are in front of an audience and you make a coin disappear, you have to believe that it's dissolving in thin air. Because if you don't believe the most, nobody in front of you is going to believe more than you. And I just showed you a bunch of resin arms that is supposedly a meditation on the connectivity of our past to our future and post-colonialism. And we've talked about all of our projects, and if we don't believe the most, no one's going to believe more than us. And so I think that's what I think about all of this practice and the NFTs and all this landscape and art. You know, we have to be the believers in charge of our own work, of the context from which our work is situated, and from all of us here together. So we are the believers in charge, and so that's what I think.
Well, thanks, Glenn. I really appreciate that. And you know what? I hate to do this to you, but I do want to stay somewhat on time, meaning a half hour late. Thank you. We're going to cut for lunch. Listen, thank you guys for coming out. I don't know, when's the next thing? 2 o'clock? Grab a bite. These artists are available. I've got some allow list cards if you want to get some. I'm shilling, you're shilling. Let's talk NFTs. Up next, WTF NFT lunch. Thank you. Thank you, guys.